The door slammed behind Willa Edwards with such force that the windows rattled, and she stumbled barefoot into the freezing January night of 1881, wearing nothing but her thin cotton nightgown and a shawl she had managed to grab as Marcus shoved her out. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs as snow swirled around her in angry white gusts. Behind her, she heard the bolt slide home with a finality that made her heart clench, and then Marcus's heavy footsteps retreating into the warmth she was no longer permitted to share. "Please," she called out, her voice cracking as she pounded on the wooden door. "Marcus, I am sorry. Please let me back inside." But there was no answer, only the howling wind that tore through the streets of Rhyolite, Nevada, carrying with it the bitter promise of a long, merciless night. Her husband had finally made good on his threats, the ones he had been making with increasing frequency over the past year as his drinking had worsened, and his temper had shortened to a hair trigger. All because she had dared to question him, dared to ask where the money had gone that was meant for food and supplies. All because she had talked back. Willa wrapped her arms around herself, her teeth already chattering as the wind cut through the thin fabric of her nightgown like it was not even there. The town was mostly dark at this hour, well past midnight, with only a few windows showing the faint glow of lamplight. Her bare feet were already going numb against the frozen ground, and she knew with a sinking certainty that she could not survive out here for long. The temperature had been dropping steadily all week, and tonight felt like the coldest yet, the kind of cold that could kill a person in a matter of hours. She stumbled away from the door, her mind racing through limited options. She had no family in Rhyolite, no close friends she could turn to at this ungodly hour. Marcus had made sure of that over the years, slowly isolating her from the few acquaintances she had made when they first arrived in this silver mining town 3 years ago. He did not like her talking to other people, did not like her going anywhere without his permission. The bruises hidden beneath her clothes were testament to what happened when she disobeyed. The main street was deserted, the storefronts dark and shuttered against the storm. Willa's feet left small prints in the fresh snow as she moved forward, though she had no clear destination in mind. She just knew she had to keep moving, had to find shelter somewhere before the cold claimed her completely. Her lungs burned with each breath of frigid air, and her fingers were losing feeling despite being tucked under her arms. She passed the general store, the assayer's office, the saloon that was finally dark after hours of raucous noise earlier in the evening. The town was built in a hurry, like most mining towns, with buildings thrown up quickly to accommodate the influx of prospectors and merchants hoping to strike it rich in the Nevada desert. It was a harsh place, beautiful in its own way during the day when the sun glinted off the surrounding hills, but brutal at night, especially in winter when the desert cold settled in with a vengeance. Willa's vision was starting to blur, whether from tears or the cold she could not say. Her steps were becoming unsteady, her body beginning to shut down in response to the freezing temperature. She knew the signs of hypothermia from the stories she had heard, knew that the drowsiness creeping over her was dangerous, that she needed to stay awake and keep moving. But her limbs felt so heavy, and the snow looked almost inviting, like a white blanket she could curl up in and rest, just for a moment. She had nearly given up, nearly let herself sink down into that deceptive softness when she saw it. A light, warm and golden, spilling from the window of a small cabin set back from the main street. It was a modest structure, well maintained from what she could see through the swirling snow, with a thin stream of smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was awake, someone had a fire going. It might be her only chance. Willa forced her legs to move, stumbling toward that beacon of hope with single-minded determination. She nearly fell twice, catching herself on fence posts and trees as her numb feet failed to navigate the uneven ground properly. But she made it finally, collapsing against the door of the cabin and raising one frozen hand to knock. The sound was pathetically weak, barely audible even to her own ears, but she knocked again, harder this time, using the last of her strength to make herself heard. For a long moment, nothing happened, and Willa felt despair wash over her. Then she heard footsteps inside, quick and purposeful, and the door swung open to reveal a tall man silhouetted against the warm glow of the fireplace beyond. He was broad-shouldered and lean, dressed in worn trousers and a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his dark hair slightly mussed as if he had been running his hands through it. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, even in her deteriorating state. They were a striking hazel color, flecked with gold, and they widened in shock and concern as he took in the sight of her shivering on his doorstep. "Good Lord," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "Madam, what happened to you?" He did not wait for an answer, instead reaching out to catch her as her legs finally gave way entirely. She felt strong arms encircle her, lifting her with surprising ease, and then she was inside, blessed warmth beginning to seep into her frozen skin. The door closed behind them, shutting out the howling wind and the deadly cold. "I need to get you warm," the man said, carrying her toward the fireplace that dominated one wall of the single-room cabin. "Can you tell me your name? Are you hurt?" Willa tried to answer, but her jaw was locked with shivers, her teeth chattering so hard she could not form words. He set her down gently in a chair close to the fire, then moved quickly to grab blankets from the bed in the corner. He wrapped them around her with efficient movements, piling them on until she was cocooned in warmth. "Your feet," he muttered, kneeling down to examine them with gentle hands. "They are nearly frostbitten. We need to warm them slowly." He disappeared for a moment, returning with a basin that he filled with water from a kettle on the stove. Not hot water, she noticed dimly, but lukewarm, which some part of her mind recognized as the right approach. Too much heat too fast could cause more damage. He eased her feet into the basin, and the sensation was excruciating, 1,000 needles of pain shooting up her legs as blood flow began to return. She gasped, tears streaming down her face, and the man's expression tightened with sympathy. "I know it hurts," he said quietly. "But it is a good sign. It means there is no permanent damage yet." As the worst of the pain subsided into a more manageable throbbing ache, Willa finally found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered, her words still somewhat slurred from the cold. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You nearly did," he said bluntly, settling back on his heels and studying her face. "What were you doing outside in the middle of a snowstorm dressed like that? Where is your husband, your family?" The questions were direct but not unkind, spoken with genuine concern rather than judgment. Willa felt her throat tighten, fresh tears threatening to spill over. "My husband put me out," she said, the words coming out small and ashamed. "I questioned where our money had gone, and he said I had no right to talk back to him. He threw me out into the snow and locked the door." Saying it aloud made it real in a way it had not been before, made her confront the horrible reality of what Marcus had done, what he had been willing to let happen to her. The man's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek, and his eyes flashed with anger. But when he spoke, his voice remained carefully controlled. "He put you out in this weather over a question. That is not just cruel, it is attempted murder. No man has the right to do that to his wife, no matter what she said." "He has been drinking more lately," Willa heard herself say, as if that explained anything, as if it excused what Marcus had done. "He loses his temper when he drinks." "That is no excuse," the man said firmly. "Plenty of men drink and manage not to throw their wives out into blizzards." He rose to his feet, moving to the stove to pour her a cup of something from a pot that smelled of herbs and honey. "Here, drink this. It will help warm you from the inside." Willa accepted the cup with shaking hands, taking small sips of the warm liquid. It was some kind of tea, sweet and soothing, and it did indeed seem to help, spreading warmth through her chest and belly. As the immediate crisis of her frozen state began to pass, she became more aware of her surroundings, of the cabin that had become her unexpected sanctuary. It was a simple space but surprisingly comfortable, with everything neat and well organized. The bed in the corner had a thick quilt, and there were books stacked on a small table beside it. A rifle hung above the door, and saddle gear was arranged along one wall. This was clearly the home of a working man, probably a cowboy or ranch hand, someone who lived alone but took pride in his space. "I am Harrison McBride," the man said, as if reading her thoughts. "I work at the Silver Star Ranch about 5 miles outside of town. I keep this cabin in Rhyolite for when I need to stay overnight, especially in winter." He gestured around the space with one calloused hand. "It is not much, but it is warm and dry." "I am Willa Edwards," she replied, finally getting her shivering under some control. "And it is the most wonderful place I have ever seen right now. You saved my life, Mr. McBride. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me for basic human decency," Harrison said, his tone brooking no argument. "And please call me Harrison. Mr. McBride makes me sound like my father." There was a slight smile on his face as he said it, the first hint of levity since he had opened the door to find her half frozen on his doorstep. Willa found herself studying him more carefully now that the immediate panic had subsided. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 27 or 28, with a weathered face that spoke of long hours spent outdoors. His hands were rough with calluses, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living, but they had been remarkably gentle when handling her injured feet. There was something solid and reassuring about him, a quiet competence that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a very long time. "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" Harrison said, then immediately looked apologetic. "I am sorry, that was rude. I just need to know if you are old enough to make your own decisions about what happens next." "I am 24, Willa said. "I have been married to Marcus for 5 years. 5 long, increasingly difficult years, though she did not say that part aloud. She had been 19 when they married, full of hope and naive expectations about what marriage would be like. Marcus had been charming in the beginning, attentive and kind, but that had changed gradually after the wedding, so slowly that she had not realized what was happening until it was too late. Harrison nodded, some tension leaving his shoulders. "Then you are old enough to decide what you want to do. You do not have to go back to him, Willa. There are options, even for married women, especially when a man has proven himself dangerous." The thought had not even occurred to her, the possibility of not returning to Marcus. In her mind, she was his wife for better or worse, until death did they part. That was what she had promised in front of the preacher and God and everyone. But as she sat there in Harrison's warm cabin, wrapped in blankets and drinking tea, she found herself wondering for the first time if perhaps God did not expect her to stay with a man who would throw her out into a deadly blizzard for daring to question him. "I do not know what to do," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere to go, no money of my own. Everything I have is tied to Marcus, and I doubt he would let me leave even if I wanted to." "Let me worry about that," Harrison said. "For tonight, you need to rest and recover. We can figure out the rest in the morning when you are stronger." He moved toward the bed, pulling off the quilt and bringing it to her. "You take the bed. I will sleep by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Willa protested, though the thought of lying down was almost overwhelmingly tempting. "You have already done so much for me." "You are injured and recovering from hypothermia," Harrison said firmly. "I am fine sleeping by the fire. I have done it plenty of times before." He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as her legs wobbled beneath her and guided her to the bed. The mattress was soft beneath her, the sheets clean and smelling faintly of sage, and Willa could not suppress a small sound of relief as she sank into it. Harrison pulled the blankets up around her, tucking them in with a care that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Sleep," he said gently. "You are safe here. I promise nothing is going to hurt you tonight." And despite everything, despite the trauma and the fear and the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring, Willa believed him. There was something in his voice, in his eyes, that made her trust him in a way she had not trusted anyone in years. She closed her eyes, and within moments, exhaustion pulled her down into sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, pale morning light filtering through the cabin's single window. For a moment, Willa was disoriented, unsure where she was or how she had gotten there. Then it all came rushing back, the fight with Marcus, the terrible cold, Harrison's kindness. She sat up slowly, testing her body for damage. Everything ached and her feet still throbbed, but she was alive and relatively whole, which was more than she had any right to expect. Harrison was at the stove, his back to her as he worked on breakfast. He had changed into fresh clothes, a blue shirt that brought out the color in his eyes and clean trousers, his hair damp as if he had washed recently. "Good morning," he said without turning around, somehow aware that she was awake. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Willa admitted, pushing the blankets aside and swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. "But better than I have any right to be." She looked down at herself, suddenly acutely aware that she was still wearing only her thin nightgown. "I apologize for my state of dress. It is hardly proper. Given the circumstances, I think we can overlook propriety," Harrison said, turning to face her with a slight smile. "But I did think of that. Mrs. Chen, who runs the laundry, is about your size, and she owes me a favor. I was planning to go ask if she might lend you some clothes until we can figure out a more permanent solution." He brought her a plate with bacon, eggs, and a thick slice of bread. "But first, you need to eat. You need your strength." The food was simple but delicious, and Willa realized she was ravenously hungry. She could not remember the last time Marcus had provided a decent meal. Most of their money had been going to his drinking in recent months, leaving little for necessities like food. She ate quickly, barely pausing for breath, and Harrison watched with a satisfaction that suggested he had noticed her thinness, the way her collarbone stood out too prominently. "Thank you," she said when she had finished, setting the plate aside. "For everything. I know I said it last night, but it bears repeating. You saved my life, Harrison." "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though they both knew that was not entirely true. Plenty of people would have turned away, not wanting to get involved in a domestic dispute, not wanting to risk the wrath of an angry husband. "Will you really help me get some clothes?" Willa asked. "I cannot impose on you forever, but I need something to wear if I am to figure out what to do next." "Of course," Harrison said. "Give me an hour or so. Mrs. Chen is usually up early." He hesitated, then added, "While I am gone, bar the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. I will knock 3 times, then twice, so you know it is me." The precaution sent a chill down Willa's spine, the reminder that Marcus was still out there, that he might come looking for her. "Do you think he will try to find me?" "I think he might," Harrison said honestly. "Once he sobers up and realizes what he did, he might panic." Or he might be angry that you did not die as he intended. Either way, it is better to be careful." His jaw tightened again, that flash of anger returning. "But I will not let him hurt you again, Willa. I give you my word on that." After Harrison left, Willa did as he had asked, sliding the heavy wooden bar into place across the door. She felt strange being alone in his cabin, surrounded by his things, but also strangely peaceful. The morning light streaming through the window was soft and golden, and the fire had burned down to glowing coals that still radiated warmth. She found herself wandering the small space, looking at the books on his table. He had an eclectic collection, everything from dime novels to Shakespeare, from practical guides on animal husbandry to poetry by Whitman and Dickinson. She was holding a worn copy of Jane Eyre when she heard the knock, 3 times and then twice, exactly as Harrison had said. She hurried to unbar the door, pulling it open to find him standing there with a bundle of clothes in his arms and a serious expression on his face. "I have good news and bad news," he said, stepping inside and setting the bundle on the bed. "The good news is that Mrs. Chen was happy to lend you these clothes. The bad news is that word has spread through town about what happened last night. Your husband is telling anyone who will listen that you ran off with another man, that you abandoned him." Willa felt her stomach drop. "That is a lie. He threw me out." "You know he did." "I know," Harrison said firmly. "And I made sure Mrs. Chen knows the truth too. But you need to understand, Willa, that Marcus is trying to control the narrative. He is trying to make himself look like the victim so that if anyone sees you with me or anyone else helping you, they will think poorly of you rather than of him." It was a clever strategy, Willa had to admit, even as it made her sick. Marcus had always been good at manipulating people, at presenting himself as the wronged party. "What do I do?" "For now, you get dressed, and then we go see the sheriff," Harrison said. "We tell him exactly what happened, and we ask for his help in keeping you safe. Sheriff Crawford is a decent man. He will not stand for a husband trying to kill his wife, regardless of what excuse the man gives." Willa nodded, trying to ignore the fear coiling in her stomach. She took the bundle of clothes into the corner, using a sheet Harrison thoughtfully held up to give her privacy. Mrs. Chen had provided a simple but serviceable dress in dark blue calico, along with undergarments, stockings, and even a pair of worn but sturdy boots. Everything fit reasonably well, though the dress was slightly loose in places where Willa had lost weight. When she emerged, Harrison's expression softened. "You look much better," he said. "More yourself." It was a strange comment, given that he had only just met her, but somehow Willa understood what he meant. She felt more human now, more capable of facing what needed to be done. The walk to the sheriff's office was tense. Rhyolite was bustling with activity despite the previous night's storm. The snow had stopped, and the sun was out, turning the white drifts into glittering expanses that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. But Willa felt exposed, certain that everyone was staring at her, judging her. And indeed, several people did stare, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Harrison walked close beside her, his hand hovering near her elbow without quite touching, a protective presence that gave her courage. When they reached the sheriff's office, he held the door open for her, and they stepped into the warmth together. Sheriff Tom Crawford was a grizzled man in his 50s with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He looked up from his desk as they entered, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he took in Willa's appearance and Harrison's protective stance. "McBride," he said in greeting. "And Mrs. Edwards, if I am not mistaken. I heard your husband was looking for you this morning." His tone was carefully neutral, revealing nothing of his own opinions. "Sheriff Crawford," Harrison said before Willa could speak. "I need to report an attempted murder." That got the sheriff's attention. He sat up straighter, gesturing for them to take seats in front of his desk. "That is a serious accusation. You had better explain." Harrison did, laying out the events of the previous night in clear, concise terms. How he had heard the desperate knocking at his door well after midnight. How he had found Willa half frozen on his doorstep, barefoot and dressed only in a nightgown. How she had told him that her husband had thrown her out into the blizzard for questioning him. Throughout the recitation, Sheriff Crawford's expression grew darker, his mouth pressing into a tight line. When Harrison finished, the sheriff turned his attention to Willa. "Is this true, Mrs. Edwards? Your husband put you out in that storm last night?" "Yes, sir," Willa said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We argued about money, and I asked him where our household funds had gone. He had been drinking, and he became very angry. He said I had no right to question him, that I needed to learn my place. Then he opened the door and pushed me outside. I tried to get back in, but he had locked it. I would have died if Harrison had not taken me in." "And where did you spend the night?" Sheriff Crawford asked, his gaze sharp. "In my cabin with the door barred," Harrison said firmly. "Mrs. Edwards took the bed. I slept by the fire. Everything was completely proper given the emergency circumstances." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I believe you. And I believe Mrs. Edwards. The problem is, what Marcus Edwards did, while reprehensible and cruel, is not technically illegal under territorial law. A man has broad authority over his wife and his household, and unless I can prove he intended to kill you, which would be difficult, there is not much I can do to punish him." Willa felt her heart sink. She had known, on some level, that the law favored men, especially husbands, but hearing it stated so baldly was still a blow. "However," Sheriff Crawford continued, raising a hand to forestall their protests, "I can make it very clear to Marcus Edwards that I am watching him, and that if anything happens to you, Mrs. Edwards, he will be the first person I come looking for. I can also suggest very strongly that he might want to consider a separation, given the circumstances. Sometimes, when a marriage has deteriorated to this point, it is better for all involved to go their separate ways." "He will never agree to that," Willa said quietly. "He considers me his property. He will not let me go without a fight." "Then we make it more trouble than it is worth for him to fight," Sheriff Crawford said. "Where are you staying now?" Harrison and Willa exchanged glances. They had not discussed this, had not planned beyond getting to the sheriff's office. "She can stay with me," Harrison said after a moment. "In my cabin. It is not ideal from a propriety standpoint, but it is safe, and she will not be alone with me during the day. I work at the Silver Star Ranch, so I am gone most of the time. And before anyone starts gossiping, I want it clear that I am offering shelter to someone in need, nothing more." "For now," Sheriff Crawford said, and there was something almost knowing in his eyes. "But people will talk, McBride. You know they will, and that talk could damage both your reputations." "Let them talk," Harrison said with a shrug. "I would rather have people gossip about me than have a woman die because I was too concerned with appearances to help her." The sheriff smiled slightly at that, a glimmer of approval crossing his weathered face. "You are a good man, McBride. All right, here is what we are going to do. I am going to pay a visit to Marcus Edwards and have a very frank conversation with him about his behavior and the consequences if it continues. I am going to make it clear that Mrs. Edwards is under my protection, and that any attempt to harm her will result in him spending a very long time in my jail, regardless of what the territorial law says. And I am going to suggest that he consider giving his wife a divorce on grounds of cruelty." "Will he listen?" Willa asked. "Probably not immediately," Sheriff Crawford admitted. But once he sobers up and realizes how close he came to hanging for murder, he might start to see reason. In the meantime, you stay with McBride, keep your head down and let me handle your husband." They left the sheriff's office feeling somewhat reassured but still uncertain. The sun was higher now, and the temperature had risen enough that the snow was beginning to melt, creating muddy ruts in the main street. Harrison guided Willa back toward his cabin, taking a slightly roundabout route that avoided the busiest parts of town. "I am sorry," Willa said as they walked. "I have completely upended your life. You probably wish you had never answered your door last night." Harrison stopped walking and turned to face her, his hazel eyes serious. "I do not regret helping you for a single moment, Willa, and I want you to stop apologizing for things that are not your fault. You did not ask for any of this. You did not deserve what Marcus did to you. And I am glad I was there to help." There was something in his voice, an intensity that made Willa's breath catch. She found herself looking at him properly, really seeing him for the first time. The strong line of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes, the broad shoulders that looked like they could carry any burden. He was handsome, she realized with a start, in a rugged, unpretentious way that was far more appealing than Marcus's slick charm had ever been. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the help, but for believing me, for treating me like I matter." "You do matter," Harrison said firmly. "Every person matters, regardless of what their circumstances are." The days that followed fell into a tentative routine. Harrison would wake early and make breakfast for both of them before heading out to the Silver Star Ranch, where he worked as a foreman overseeing a crew of cowboys. Willa would spend the days tidying the cabin, reading his books, and gradually regaining her strength. Her feet healed slowly, the frostbite damage fortunately minimal thanks to Harrison's quick action. In the evenings, Harrison would return, and they would share dinner and conversation by the fire. It was during these evening conversations that Willa began to really know Harrison McBride. He had grown up on a ranch in Montana, he told her, the youngest of 4 brothers. His father had been a hard man but fair, teaching all his sons the value of honest work and treating others with respect. Harrison had come to Nevada 5 years ago, drawn by the promise of opportunity in the mining towns, and had found work at the Silver Star Ranch, where he had proven himself capable enough to earn a promotion to foreman. "You like the work?" Willa asked one evening as they sat by the fire, she with a cup of tea and he with coffee. "I do," Harrison said, considering the question carefully. "It is hard work, but it is honest. I like being outside working with the horses and cattle. And the owner, Mr. Peterson, is a good man. He treats his workers fairly, pays decent wages. Not everyone in this business does." "Do you ever think about having your own ranch?" Willa found herself asking. It was an intimate question, the kind that implied a future, but it felt natural in the warm comfort of the cabin. "Sometimes," Harrison admitted. "I have been saving money, putting aside what I can. Maybe in another 5 or 10 years I will have enough to buy some land, start small with a few head of cattle. But it is a big undertaking, ranching. It is not something a man should do alone." Their eyes met across the fire, and Willa felt her heart skip a beat. There was something in Harrison's gaze, a warmth and a question, that made her pulse quicken. She looked away first, suddenly flustered, aware that she was still a married woman, that she had no right to the feelings beginning to stir in her chest. But the feelings were there nonetheless, growing stronger with each passing day. She found herself looking forward to Harrison's return in the evenings, found herself thinking about him during the long hours when he was away. The way he moved, economical and graceful. The sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. The gentleness in his hands when he helped her with some task, always careful, always respectful. It had been 2 weeks since the night Harrison had found her freezing on his doorstep when Sheriff Crawford came to visit. His expression was grave as Harrison led him into the cabin, and Willa felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "I have news," the sheriff said without preamble. "I have been keeping an eye on Marcus Edwards as I promised. He left town 3 days ago. Word is he headed to Virginia City, chasing rumors of a big silver strike. He cleared out what was left in your house, sold most of the furniture, and left without paying his debts." Willa should have felt relieved, but instead, she just felt empty. 5 years of marriage, and Marcus had simply abandoned her without a backward glance, as if she had never mattered at all. "So he is just gone." "It appears so," Sheriff Crawford said, "which, legally speaking, puts you in an interesting position. Nevada has some of the most progressive divorce laws in the country. If your husband has abandoned you, you can file for divorce on those grounds after a 6-month waiting period. And given what he did to you, I suspect a judge would be sympathetic to granting it even sooner." "A divorce," Willa repeated, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. In her world, in the world she had grown up in, divorce was scandalous, something that happened to other people, never to decent women. But then, decent women's husbands did not usually try to kill them either. "You do not have to decide now," Sheriff Crawford said gently. "But I wanted you to know that you have options, Mrs. Edwards. You are not trapped, not anymore." After the sheriff left, Willa sat in silence, processing the information. Harrison busied himself with making coffee, giving her space to think. Finally, she looked up at him. "What do you think I should do?" "I think that is entirely your decision," Harrison said carefully. "But if you are asking my opinion, I think you should file for divorce. Marcus made it clear through his actions that he does not want to be married to you. He tried to kill you and then he abandoned you. You deserve better than that. You deserve a chance at a real life with someone who will treat you the way you should be treated." "And what way is that?" Willa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harrison set down his coffee cup and came to sit beside her, close but not touching. "With kindness," he said quietly. "With respect. With love. You should be cherished, Willa, not abused. You should be able to speak your mind without fear. You should wake up each morning feeling safe and valued, not wondering what you might do wrong that day." Tears spilled down Willa's cheeks, and she made no move to wipe them away. "I had forgotten," she said, her voice breaking. "I had forgotten that marriage could be anything other than what I had with Marcus. I thought that was just how it was, that I had to endure it." "No," Harrison said firmly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "That is not how it should be. That is not how it has to be." The touch was electric, sending warmth spreading through Willa's body. She looked up at Harrison, at his kind eyes and his strong, honest face, and felt something shift inside her. This was what she wanted, she realized. Not just safety, not just shelter, but this. Him. The way he made her feel seen and valued. The way his presence made her feel like she could breathe for the first time in years. "Harrison," she whispered, and his name on her lips felt like a prayer and a promise all at once. "Willa," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. I care about you. More than I should, more than is probably proper given your circumstances. But I do. And if you choose to file for divorce, if you choose to end your marriage to Marcus, I want you to know that I will be here. I will wait as long as it takes. And when you are free, if you will have me, I would like to court you properly. I would like to see if this thing between us could become something more." Willa's heart was racing, her breath coming in short gasps. "You barely know me," she said, but there was no conviction in the words. "I know enough," Harrison said. "I know you are brave and strong." I know you are kind, that you thank me every day for things that do not require thanks. I know you love to read, that you laugh at the funny parts and cry at the sad ones. I know you sing when you think no one can hear you, and that you have a beautiful voice. I know you deserve so much better than what life has given you so far, and I would like to be part of giving you that better life if you will let me. I want that too, Willa said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I know it is too soon. I know I should be more cautious, but I cannot help how I feel. You make me feel safe and valued and seen. You make me want to believe in happy endings again. Harrison smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree. Then we will make our own happy ending, he said. Together. But we do it right, Willa. We file for your divorce, we wait the appropriate time, and we let people see that this is real and honest and good. I will not have anyone saying you are an adulteress or that I stole another man's wife. You deserve better than that. Willa nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words even as part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind. You are right. We do this properly. The next day, with Harrison at her side for support, Willa went to the office of Mr. Samuel Brennan, one of Rhyolite's 2 attorneys. Mr. Brennan was a shrewd man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that assessed her carefully as she explained her situation. She told him everything, holding nothing back. The abuse, the drinking, the night Marcus had thrown her out, his subsequent abandonment. Mr. Brennan listened without interruption, making notes on a pad of paper. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. You have grounds for divorce on multiple counts, Mrs. Edwards. Abandonment, certainly, but also cruelty and a failure to provide. Nevada law is quite progressive in this regard. I can file the papers today, and we should be able to get a hearing within 2 months, perhaps sooner given the circumstances. 2 months? Willa asked, hope flaring in her chest. Possibly, Mr. Brennan cautioned. The judge will want to be satisfied that Mr. Edwards has truly abandoned you and that reconciliation is not possible. But given that he has left town and cleared out your home, I do not anticipate much difficulty. The bigger question is what you will do in the interim. Do you have means to support yourself? It was a valid question, and one Willa had been trying not to think about. She had no money, no property, no skills that would command significant wages. Harrison had been supporting her, but she could not rely on his generosity forever. It was not fair to him, and it would only fuel the gossip already circulating through town. I can help her find work, Harrison said before Willa could answer. Mrs. Peterson, the ranch owner's wife, has been looking for someone to help with the household and to teach their 2 daughters. Willa is educated and well-spoken. She would be perfect for the position. Is this true? Mr. Brennan asked Willa directly. You can read and write, you have education. Yes, sir, Willa said. My father was a schoolteacher. He made sure all his children, daughters included, received a thorough education. I can read, write, do sums, and I know history, geography, and literature. I would be happy to work as a governess if the position is available. Mr. Brennan nodded approvingly. Then I suggest you pursue that, Mrs. Edwards. Having your own income and living situation separate from Mr. McBride will help your case considerably. It will demonstrate that you are capable of independence and that your relationship with Mr. McBride, whatever form it may take, is not one of dependency but of mutual choice. The wisdom in that advice was clear. That afternoon, Harrison drove Willa out to the Silver Star Ranch in a borrowed wagon. The ranch was beautiful, sprawling across several thousand acres of high desert, with cattle grazing in the distance and horses in well-maintained corrals. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch and large windows that let in plenty of light. Mrs. Victoria Peterson was a handsome woman in her late 30s with kind brown eyes and hair beginning to show threads of silver. She greeted them warmly, inviting them into a comfortable parlor and offering tea. Her two daughters, Emily and Sarah, aged 10 and 8 respectively, peeked shyly from behind their mother's skirts. "Harrison tells me you are looking for a position, Mrs. Peterson said after the pleasantries had been exchanged. "He speaks very highly of you, Mrs. Edwards." "I would be grateful for the opportunity to work," Willa said honestly. "I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and various other subjects. I enjoy working with children, and I am willing to help with household tasks as well if needed." "Tell me about your background," Mrs. Peterson said, and Willa explained about her father's profession, her own education, her marriage to Marcus and its dissolution. She was honest about her circumstances, knowing that Mrs. Peterson would hear the gossip eventually and preferring to control the narrative. Mrs. Peterson listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Edwards, and I am sorry for what you have endured. No woman should have to suffer such treatment." She glanced at her daughters, who were now openly staring at Willa with curiosity. "Girls, why do you not show Mrs. Edwards your schoolroom?" The schoolroom turned out to be a bright, pleasant space on the second floor, with desks, a blackboard, and shelves filled with books. Emily and Sarah were eager to show off their things, chattering about their lessons and what they had been learning. Willa listened with genuine interest, asking questions and making suggestions, and she could see Mrs. Peterson watching her with approval. "The position is yours if you want it," Mrs. Peterson said when they had returned downstairs. "You would teach the girls 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. In exchange, I can offer you room and board here at the ranch, plus a salary of $15 a month. That should be enough to give you some independence while you sort out your legal situation." $15 a month was not a fortune, but it was honest wages, more than many women could hope to earn. And room and board at the ranch would solve the problem of her living situation, removing the impropriety of staying with Harrison. "I accept," Willa said, unable to keep the relief and gratitude from her voice. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. You will not regret this." "I am sure I will not, Mrs. Peterson said with a warm smile. "And please call me Victoria. We are not overly formal here." Willa moved to the ranch the following week, settling into a small but comfortable room on the second floor near the schoolroom. It was strange at first, having her own space again, her own little domain. Victoria had provided basic furnishings and encouraged her to make the room her own. Willa hung the few possessions she had managed to accumulate on the walls and arranged the books Harrison had given her as a parting gift on the small shelf by her bed. Teaching Emily and Sarah turned out to be a joy. Both girls were bright and curious, eager to learn despite their occasional tendency to get distracted or silly. Willa found herself looking forward to her days with them, to the questions they asked, and the progress they made. She introduced them to poetry and history, to geography and basic science, and she watched them bloom under the attention. But the evenings were for Harrison. He had his own cabin on the ranch property, a short walk from the main house, and he would often invite Willa to join him for dinner after she had finished her duties. They were careful to be circumspect, leaving the door open and keeping their interactions visible to anyone who might pass by. But those evenings were the highlight of Willa's days. They talked about everything and nothing. Harrison told her about his work, the challenges of managing a ranch crew and dealing with cattle and the unpredictable weather. Willa told him about her students, about the books she was reading, about her dreams for the future. Slowly, carefully, they were building something real, a foundation of friendship and respect that could eventually become more. The first time Harrison held her hand, it was late evening in early March, almost 2 months after that terrible night in the snow. They were sitting on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun set over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Willa had been talking about something, she could not even remember what, when she felt Harrison's fingers gently intertwine with hers. She stopped mid-sentence, looking down at their joined hands. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong, and the simple touch sent her heart racing. "Is this all right?" Harrison asked quietly, his voice uncertain in a way that was unusual for him. "Yes," Willa breathed. "More than all right." They sat like that until the stars came out, not saying much, just existing together in the comfortable silence, and Willa felt a contentment she had never experienced before. This was what partnership should feel like, she realized. This easy companionship, this mutual respect, this sense of being exactly where she was meant to be. In April, 2 months and 3 weeks after Willa had filed for divorce, she received word that the hearing had been scheduled. Mr. Brennan had done excellent work, gathering testimony from Sheriff Crawford, from Mrs. Chen, from Harrison, and from several other townspeople who had witnessed Marcus's behavior. The case, he assured her, was solid. The hearing took place on a bright spring morning in the courthouse in Goldfield, the county seat. Willa wore her best dress, borrowed from Victoria, and Harrison accompanied her for moral support, though he had to wait outside the courtroom since he had already provided his testimony in a sworn affidavit. Judge Henry Morrison was a stern-looking man with white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. He read through the case documents carefully, asked Willa several pointed questions about her marriage and the events leading to her filing for divorce, and then sat back to consider. "Mrs. Edwards," he said finally, "the law gives me broad discretion in matters of divorce, and I do not grant them lightly. Marriage is a sacred institution, and it should not be dissolved for trivial reasons. However, the evidence presented to me indicates that your husband not only failed in his duties to provide for and protect you, but actively endangered your life. That is not a trivial matter. Furthermore, his abandonment of you and your marital home demonstrates clearly that he has no interest in honoring his vows. Therefore, I am granting your petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and abandonment." Relief washed over Willa so strongly that she swayed on her feet. The judge continued, "The divorce will be final 30 days from today, during which time Mr. Edwards may contest it if he chooses. However, given that he has made no appearance and his whereabouts are unknown, I do not anticipate any such contest. You are free to remarry after the 30-day period has elapsed. This court is adjourned." Willa walked out of the courthouse in a daze, hardly able to believe it was over. Harrison was waiting on the steps, his expression anxious until he saw her face. "He granted it?" he asked, hope clear in his voice. "He granted it," Willa confirmed, and then she was laughing and crying at the same time, and Harrison was sweeping her up in his arms, spinning her around right there on the courthouse steps in full view of anyone who cared to watch. When he set her down, his eyes were shining with emotion. 30 days, he said. "I can wait 30 days. The 30 days felt like both an eternity and no time at all. Willa threw herself into her work with Emily and Sarah, and Harrison continued his duties at the ranch, but there was a new energy between them, a sense of anticipation and joy. They were no longer hiding what they felt, no longer pretending that their relationship was purely platonic. Harrison courted her properly, with wildflowers he picked himself, and small gifts he carved from wood during his spare time. He wrote her letters even though they saw each other almost every day, beautiful letters that spoke of his feelings and his hopes for their future. When the 30 days had finally passed, Harrison asked Willa to marry him properly, down on one knee in the meadow behind the ranch house, with a simple gold band he had purchased with his savings. "Willa Edwards," he said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion, "you are the strongest, bravest, most wonderful woman I have ever known. You have made me happier in these past few months than I thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Willa said, not even having to think about it. "Yes, Harrison, 1,000 times yes." They were married in early June of 1881, less than 6 months after that cold night when Willa had nearly died on Harrison's doorstep. The wedding was small and simple, held at the ranch with Victoria and her husband James as witnesses, along with Sheriff Crawford, Mr. Brennan, Mrs. Chen, and a handful of Harrison's fellow ranch hands. Willa wore a new dress that Victoria had helped her sew, pale blue with white lace, and Harrison wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his face cleanly shaven. The ceremony was performed by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through Rhyolite, and Willa felt none of the trepidation she had felt at her first wedding. This was right, she knew it in her bones. This was the man she was meant to be with, the man who saw her as an equal and a partner rather than property. When Harrison kissed her after they were pronounced husband and wife, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Their wedding night was spent in Harrison's cabin, which was now their cabin, and it was everything Willa had never known intimacy could be. Harrison was patient and tender, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. It was not just physical, though that aspect was wonderful in ways she had not imagined. It was emotional, a joining of souls as much as bodies, and when Willa finally fell asleep in Harrison's arms, she felt truly happy for the first time in her life. The months that followed were busy and full. Willa continued teaching Emily and Sarah, while also managing the household she now shared with Harrison. Harrison continued his work as foreman, and together they saved every penny they could toward their dream of buying their own land. James Peterson, impressed with both Harrison's work ethic and his obvious devotion to his wife, had promised to help them when the time came, to vouch for them with the land office and perhaps even extend a loan if needed. In the fall, Willa realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited to be sure before telling Harrison. When she finally did, over dinner one evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He dropped his fork, stared at her in shock for a moment, and then let out a whoop of joy so loud it probably scared the horses. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break, and when he pulled back, there were tears on his face. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "You and me, Willa, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Harrison said. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you. I promise I am going to do everything I can to give you a good life, to keep you and your mother safe and loved." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Willa did have to stop teaching in her 7th month when her growing belly made it difficult to move around the schoolroom comfortably. Victoria had already found a replacement teacher, a young woman from Carson City, but she made it clear that Willa would always have a place on the ranch if she wanted it. In early May of 1882, a little over a year after that fateful night, Willa went into labor. Harrison was terrified, pacing the floor of their cabin while Victoria and the midwife attended to Willa in the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult, lasting almost 20 hours, and there were moments when Willa was not sure she would survive it. But she did, and at dawn on May 15th, she delivered a healthy baby boy. When Harrison was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed as if in a dream, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Willa's arms. "It is a boy," she said softly, exhausted but glowing with happiness. "We have a son, Harrison." Harrison sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out with one finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers curled around Harrison's finger, and Willa saw her husband's face crumple with emotion. "He is perfect," Harrison whispered. "You are perfect. Both of you." They named him Henry Marcus. Henry for Harrison's father and Marcus as a middle name because, as Willa explained, she wanted to take something that had caused her pain and transform it into something beautiful. Harrison understood and agreed, and little Henry proved to be an easy baby, content and curious about the world around him. 2 months after Henry's birth, Harrison came home one evening with news. "James is selling us the south section of the ranch," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. 200 acres with water rights to the creek. He is giving us a good price, and he is letting us pay it off over 5 years. Willa, we are going to have our own ranch, our own land." Willa felt tears spring to her eyes. This was the dream they had been working toward, the future they had been building. "When? We can start building our house this fall," Harrison said. "James said I can use ranch resources and labor to help, and we should be able to move in by spring. It will be small at first, just a few rooms, but we can add on as we need to. And we can start with maybe 20 head of cattle, build up the herd slowly." The house they built was indeed small, but it was theirs, every nail and board placed with care and love. It had 3 rooms to start with, a main living area with a kitchen and fireplace, a bedroom for Harrison and Willa, and a smaller room for Henry. There was a porch facing east so they could watch the sunrise, and Harrison carved McBride Ranch into a wooden sign that he mounted over the door. They moved in during March of 1883 when Henry was almost a year old. Their first night in their own home, Willa stood on the porch with Harrison, watching the stars come out over their land. "Can you believe it?" she asked softly. 2 years ago, I thought I was going to die in the snow. Now I have a husband I love, a beautiful son, and our own ranch. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Harrison said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "It is real, and it is ours, and we built it together. I love you, Willa McBride." "I love you too, Harrison," Willa replied, turning in his arms to kiss him. "More than I ever thought possible." The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching was hard work, subject to the whims of weather and market prices and cattle diseases. There were good years and lean years, times when money was tight and times when they had a little extra. But through it all, Harrison and Willa faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. In 1884, Willa gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Hope Victoria. Hope was a spirited child from the beginning, with Harrison's hazel eyes and Willa's determination. She kept them on their toes, always getting into something, always asking questions. Henry adored his little sister, already showing signs of the protective nature he would carry into adulthood. They added another room to the house, then another, as their family and their fortunes grew. Harrison proved to be an excellent rancher with an instinct for cattle and horses that earned respect throughout the region. Willa managed the household and the finances, her education serving her well as she kept meticulous records and made shrewd decisions about when to buy and sell. In 1887, They had their third child, another boy they named Samuel James, after Mr. Brennan, who had helped Willa with her divorce, and James Peterson, who had given them their start. Sam was a quiet, thoughtful child, content to follow his older siblings around and observe the world with serious blue eyes. By 1890, the McBride Ranch had grown to 500 acres with a herd of over 100 cattle. They had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who lived in a bunkhouse Harrison had built near the barn. The house had expanded to 7 rooms, with a proper parlor and a dining room in addition to the bedrooms. It was not a mansion by any means, but it was comfortable and filled with love. One evening in late summer of 1890, Willa and Harrison sat on their porch as they had done countless times before, watching their children play in the yard. Henry was 14 now, tall and serious, already helping his father with the ranch work. Hope was 6, a whirlwind of energy and imagination. Sam was 3, toddling after his older siblings with single-minded determination. "You ever think about that night?" Willa asked quietly. "The night you found me, sometimes," Harrison admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago and yesterday all at once. I think about how close I came to not answering the door, how I almost convinced myself it was just the wind." "I am glad you answered," Willa said, reaching for his hand. "You saved my life that night, Harrison, not just from the cold, but from the life I was living. You showed me what love really is, what partnership can be. You gave me everything I have now." "We gave each other everything," Harrison corrected gently. "You saved me too, Willa. I was lonely before you came into my life. I had work and friends, but I did not have a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. You gave me that. You and our children, this ranch, this life we have made together. That is everything to me." Willa leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder, feeling contentment wash over her. The road that had brought her here had been painful and frightening, but it had also been necessary. She would not wish her experience with Marcus on anyone, but she also would not change what had come after. The suffering had made the joy that much sweeter, had taught her to appreciate what she had. "I love you," she said simply, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too," Harrison replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Always and forever." As the sun set over the McBride Ranch, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Willa reflected on how far she had come. From a woman who had been thrown out into the cold by a cruel husband to a woman who had built a life of warmth and love with a good man. From someone who had been told she had no worth to someone who knew her value and was valued in return. From despair to hope, from darkness to light, the years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. In 1893, Willa gave birth to their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Grace Elena. Grace was a sweet-natured baby who grew into an equally sweet-natured child, with a gift for music that delighted her mother. Harrison built a small piano that he had shipped all the way from San Francisco, and Grace spent hours picking out tunes and eventually learning to play properly from a music teacher in Rhyolite. Henry grew into a fine young man, strong and capable like his father, but with a gentleness that was all his own. At 18, he married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a smart and kind young woman named Catherine, and they built their own small house on the edge of the McBride property. When their first child was born, a boy they named after Harrison, Willa held her grandson and marveled at the way life continued, at the way love multiplied rather than divided. Hope proved to be as spirited as her name suggested, with a talent for horses that surpassed even Harrison's. She could break and train a horse with patience and skill that left experienced cowboys shaking their heads in admiration. She had no interest in marriage, she declared at 16. She wanted to run a horse breeding program. Harrison, who had always believed his daughters were every bit as capable as his sons, supported her fully, and by the time she was 20, Hope had established a reputation throughout Nevada for producing quality horses. Sam, the quiet middle child, surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for learning that rivaled his mother's. He devoured every book he could get his hands on, and when he turned 17, Willa and Harrison sent him to university in San Francisco, where he studied law. He returned 4 years later with a degree and a determination to help people, just as Mr. Brennan had helped his mother. He set up practice in Rhyolite, and within a few years, he was known as the lawyer who would take on cases others would not, who fought for the underdog. Grace, the baby of the family, grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's dark hair and her father's eyes. She married at 21, a banker from Carson City who adored her, and moved away to start her own family. It was hard for Willa to see her youngest child leave, but she was happy that Grace had found a good man, someone who would treat her with the love and respect she deserved. By 1905, 24 years after that fateful night in the snow, Willa and Harrison were in their early 50s, their hair showing threads of gray but their love for each other as strong as ever. The McBride Ranch was now one of the most successful in the region, spanning over 1,000 acres with 200 head of cattle and Hope's thriving horse breeding program. They had weathered droughts and economic downturns, had lost cattle to disease and had to rebuild after a barn fire, but they had done it all together, supporting each other through every crisis. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a familiar ritual after all these years, Harrison turned to Willa with a soft smile. "Do you remember what you said to me once, about wanting to believe in happy endings again?" "I remember," Willa said, squeezing his hand. "I just want you to know that you gave me my happy ending," Harrison said. "Every day with you has been a gift, Willa, every single day." "You gave me mine too," Willa replied, her eyes misting with tears. "You took a woman who was broken and lost, and you helped her become whole again. You showed me what real love looks like. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living. I could not have asked for more." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over them that terrible night so long ago. But everything had changed since then. Willa was no longer the frightened woman in a nightgown, freezing in the snow. She was Willa McBride, wife, mother, grandmother, successful rancher, and above all, a woman who had survived and thrived. The story of how they met became a sort of legend in the region, told and retold with various embellishments. Some versions had Willa on death's door when Harrison found her. Others focused on the romance that bloomed in the aftermath. But the core remained the same, a story of kindness and compassion, of a man who opened his door to a stranger in need, and the love that grew from that simple act of humanity. As they grew older, Willa and Harrison made sure to pass on the lessons they had learned to their children and grandchildren. They taught them the importance of kindness, of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. They taught them that love was not ownership but partnership, that marriage should be a source of joy and support, not fear and pain. They taught them to work hard, to face challenges with courage, and to never give up on their dreams. In 1915, on their 34th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Willa with a trip to San Francisco. They stayed in a fine hotel, saw shows, ate at restaurants, and walked along the waterfront hand in hand like newlyweds. On their last evening, as they stood watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, Harrison pulled out a small box. "I never gave you a proper engagement ring," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold band with a small but perfect diamond. "I bought this with the first profits from Hope's horse program. I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that represents all the years we have spent together." Willa felt tears streaming down her face as Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger alongside the simple gold band she had worn for 34 years. "It is beautiful," she whispered, "but you are wrong about one thing. You did give me something beautiful. You gave me yourself, your love, your partnership. That is worth more than any ring could ever be." They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever years remained to them. And there were good years still ahead. Years of watching their grandchildren grow, of seeing the ranch continue to prosper, of sitting on their porch and counting their blessings. As the 1920s dawned, bringing with them the modern age with its automobiles and radios and changing social mores, Willa sometimes reflected on how much the world had changed since that night in 1881. Women could vote now, a development that filled her with fierce satisfaction. Divorce was less scandalous, less stigmatized. The Wild West of her youth had been tamed, the frontier settled, the mining towns that had sprung up overnight now either ghost towns or established communities. But some things had not changed. Love was still love, whether in 1881 or 1920. Kindness still mattered. And the bond between two people who had chosen each other, who had built a life together through hard work and dedication, was still the most powerful force Willa knew. On a crisp autumn evening in 1925, 44 years after Harrison had opened his door to find a freezing woman on his doorstep, Willa and Harrison sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were in their 70s now, their movements slower, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But their hands were still intertwined, their love still as evident as it had been in the beginning. "No regrets?" Harrison asked softly, a question he had asked before over the years. "Not a single one," Willa replied, also as she had replied before. "Everything we went through, everything we built, it was all worth it. You were worth it, Harrison. This life was worth it." Their children had all made successes of their own lives. Henry ran the ranch now, with his own children helping him. Hope's horse breeding program was known throughout the western states. Sam was a respected lawyer and community leader. Grace had 5 children and a happy marriage. The McBride name stood for integrity and hard work, for compassion and strength. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Willa leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder and smiled. She had survived the cold that terrible night so long ago, had been warmed not just by a fire but by the love of a good man. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and created something beautiful, something lasting. "Thank you," she whispered, as she had whispered so many times over the years. "For what?" Harrison asked, also as he had asked so many times. "For answering the door," Willa said simply. "For letting me in, for warming me, for loving me, for all of it." Harrison pressed a kiss to her forehead, his lips gentle against her skin. "It was my privilege," he said. "Every moment of it." And as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Willa McBride, formerly Willa Edwards, once a woman thrown out into the cold and left to die, smiled and knew that she had lived a life beyond her wildest dreams. She had found her happy ending, and it had been worth every moment of the journey to reach it. The McBride Ranch continued to thrive for generations, a testament to the love and hard work of its founders. And the story of Harrison and Willa lived on, told and retold to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a reminder that even in the darkest moments when all seems lost, kindness and love can transform everything. That a door opened to someone in need can change not just one life but many. That warmth shared is warmth multiplied, and that happy endings are not just fairy tales but possibilities within reach of anyone brave enough to believe in them and work for them. In the end, that was the legacy of Harrison and Willa McBride. Not just the successful ranch or the children who carried on their name, but the proof that love, real love built on respect and partnership and genuine care, could overcome even the cruelest of circumstances. That a woman thrown out into the cold could find warmth, and that warmth could become a fire that lit up not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her for generations to come.